Dina, very good to catch up with you. Been looking forward to this conversation. So we were just talking before we went live about Switzerland, and I was saying that we have an abnormally large number of Veblen members in Switzerland for some reason, and I've been lucky enough to have a few meetings there. It's extraordinarily beautiful. How long have you been there?
So I've been in Switzerland since 2009, so I always feel Swiss now. So I'm originally from Sweden, so I moved around quite a lot, but I stayed and I really like it. It's a great place. A lot of different people, a lot of, I'll say, international people as well from different countries.
Are you sporty? Because there seems to be everyone I meet in
Oh,
Switzerland
that's the
seems to
key
be.
of that's a tricky one, isn't it? So no, absolutely love skiing. I'm really into to also biking, not on the road. I do like the going
Mountain biking.
off beat in the forest, and that's fantastic
Nice.
opportunity. So it's a great place.
Yeah, I mean, I we were saying beforehand, I love being in Southeast Asia, but one of my absolute all-time favorite things is snowboarding, and so I certainly miss Europe for the ease of access to that. The closest we've got here is Japan, which is fantastic. The powder there is amazing, but it's a bit of a trek. When I used to live in Amsterdam, we would just drive down to Austria and stuff for the weekend, which is definitely the way to go.
Yeah.
Cool. And how long have you been in the Veblen program now?
So I joined the program in April this year.
Okay.
So it will be a couple of months now, and I really enjoyed it so far. It's a lot of practical learning, fantastic network.
Yeah, it does seem to attract some very cool people, which is fun. And how's your have you are you sitting on any boards?
So I did have an opportunity to join actually quite quickly. I joined the board now already in June, also through the Veblen program.
Nice. How's that going?
I love it. I absolutely love it. It's a fantastic opportunity just to meet different minded people that's working towards the same goal. You have both, I would say, those who have their day jobs, but also entrepreneurs, which kind of brings us together to common goal. Then we also learning together and exchange a lot of experiences.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean we talk about kind of the different reasons for joining a board, but I think for me that the connecting with different people from different industries, different backgrounds, and then having really good high level strategic conversations. I find really fascinating. I think like there's plenty of other environments where you can meet people from different backgrounds, but I find often it just kind of defers to small talk. Whereas when you're responsible for the future of a company, it just it elevates the conversation level. So you found that as well.
I actually do. I mean, for me, it's that we have through the Veblen program, I find amazing that you meet people you never would talking to. So speaking with people all over the world, and also in the board, but also outside the board when you have a networking events, just meeting one to one. I had some specific questions. I reached out. I got fantastic answers back. And also make me rethink some things I thought I should do, but actually this is a rather way to consider other aspects of a specific question. So it's a good way to broaden network understanding and as you say, work together through a strategic goal, through a board position and just building things up. It's that added value and that synergy you create during these meetings with these responsibilities is actually fantastic.
Sure. I really didn't mean to turn this into a blowing sunshine up Veblen's.
No, it's a lot of work as well. It's a lot of
'Cause
responsibilities. So it's the good and the bad. It takes time. You have to be very serious and really committed if you want to do this, because it's not just, oh, I'm on the board. It's actually a lot of work behind it and preparation work as well.
yeah, absolutely. So to me, like, so this isn't about Veblen necessarily, but anything interesting that you're working on at the moment? You mentioned you do quite a lot of travel for work.
So in my work, yes, there is always a bit of component of travel, but I work, work in my line of work is through anything that's internal audit or corporate governance, I would say. So internal audit, Mainly, there's a work to be done. We do a lot of remote orders today as well. The thing is, the whole COVID changed the perception of how you do things. And I also think with new tools, there's a lot of things you can actually do, how to reduce, be more efficiency, but also use, I would say, local resources on the ground. Of course, depending on the objectives where you want to aim for. But there is a lot of travel involved, yes. And also in the past, I used to be, actually, you talk about Singapore, I was when I was in oil and gas, they actually sent me over for 1 hour meeting from Geneva over to Singapore. So I stayed a week, but they say, no, you can do it for 1 day. I said, well, actually, it doesn't really work well.
So there's a report, there's been a report this week sort of on business travel and how they still think it's going to be another 2 years before it fully returns to what it was pre-COVID. And a lot of basically companies are now much more discerning about the ridiculous travel that we used to do. That we used to do that as well, like flying halfway around the world for 1 or 2 meetings. And it was really interesting. Like we started using Zoom with, so our core business is small business M&A. We found business owners were very open to Zoom. Like they didn't need, they would do a transaction on their business without needing to meet face to face. But investors seem to move very slowly when it comes to new technology. And so really up until COVID, we would have a conversation with an investor. We'd send them a Zoom link and somebody's PA would get back to us and say, no, could you use this telephone bridge, please? And then so we would have the call and they would go, yep, no, this is exactly what we're looking for. We'd love to move ahead. Can you come over on Monday? We want to shake your hand and look you in the eye before we do this deal. Like, look, I'm in Singapore, you're in New York. This really isn't a good use of my time since you've already decided it's good to go, but got to look me in the eye. Fortunately, COVID actually seemed to drag the investor community back into the 21st century, and now everyone is fine with Zoom and things. But it'll be interesting to see whether it ever fully returns.
Well, the thing is, I think, as you say, I mean, there's I think also after COVID, there's people actually learned, they know that they don't really have to do this kind of travel anymore. There are options, and even the more traditional companies, also different sectors, I believe, are more closed than, as you say, investors, bankers, but also other areas are more closed than to this new way of working. I mean, one of the biggest factors I've seen is actually if you want to hire, let's say, younger people coming out from university, or you have a couple of years responsibilities, one of the key questions they ask, okay, so how much do I need to be in the office? And if you tell them you need to be in the office from Monday to Friday, which is not the case, but there have been, other areas, they just say, sorry, I'm not going to take it. I want this flexibility. This is one of the key achievements you want to have actually to factor in when you want to hire people. If you also want to have them to stay.
And without, I know you probably need to be a bit careful, but how's your company operating around flexible time, or how much time do you spend?
We have hybrid versions. So we do about 3 days in the office and then we do 2 days off. So I think that's a very good mitigation, because you're also very important. Coming to the office, you meet the people. I mean, it is good to have that human contact, even just having coffee in the corridor, just to catch up how you're doing. So I think, it's a balancing act. You need to see how you work. There are also periods like maybe over certain holidays where you might be working more from home than other periods and so forth. But I think a hybrid version is also good. But again, it also depends on what you do and where and how your company is organized, of course.
Yeah, so we decided Unity Group, our business was global, and we had very nice offices, but because people were having to do phone calls at 11 o'clock at night and stuff, it just didn't make sense to say, hey, you got to come into the office at 9 o'clock in the morning if I know you're going to be working at 11 o'clock tonight. And so we, probably about 4 or 5 years before COVID, we just got rid of the office and said, look, just work from home, and
Yeah.
it was definitely there was definitely a loss in terms of that learning that you kind of pick up. And where I was very acutely aware of it was we often bring on a few interns each year to learn, and more often than not we end up hiring them if they're good. But I was very aware that if you hire an intern and they're working remotely, how much are they really picking up about like
Yeah.
what it's like to work in the real world? However, I've kind of come around to the other way of thinking now, which is actually if they can learn to be an effective team member remotely, that makes them infinitely more valuable to companies, because now I think the kind of the next generation of companies is actually thinking virtual from day one. So if you look at Veblen Director Program, we very much wanted to be global, because I think there's huge value in sitting on the board of international companies before you come back to your own country. So we started with that kind of international focus. And yeah, today I'm based in Singapore. Our CFO is in Melbourne. Our CEO is in Preston in the UK. Our COO is in Madeira, just off Portugal, and the rest of the team is kind of dotted around everywhere. It does make calls. It's always awkward o'clock for somebody whenever you're doing team calls. But I think if for new team members and the younger generation, if you can figure out how to keep yourself motivated and delivering good work, and develop the communication skills so that people know what you're working on.
Yeah.
I actually think it's probably more beneficial now in terms of skills that they need to learn
No,
moving forward.
absolutely. And I think, and it was quite interesting. You mentioned that. I completely agree with you. I was speaking to some people who were about to graduate. It was up in Sweden, and they actually have the university has actually integrated that kind of communication skills into the university study plan. So they actually have it. It's not much. It's just a couple of hours. I think the last half year, but just to work on, because as you say, this way of communicating is so part of the future. It's not going to go away. You need to work it out, because we all remember when we came out from school, we wiggled Bambi on the ice, right? We were trying to figure out
No idea what
something we still do, right?
yeah, absolutely.
So just to have that balancing that, I think a fantastic initiative by the university to realize the importance, but also, I mean, there's so many people studying remotely today, so they already have it in school. So they have, a lot of them have the discipline. But again, as you say, if you want to do this and make it work, you also need to have the drive to make it work. And then you will need to want to have this kind of work that requires these communication skills.
Yeah, so you're right. And I think so the ambitious people will thrive, but that's probably the same. It's always been. I have a very simple framework that I use with all team members, whether they're full-timers, interns, or freelancers, which is every day, at the end of the day, they just need to take 5 minutes and drop me an email with 4 headings: actions I took, results I got, challenges I faced, questions I've got, and just those 4 things. And I really don't want them to spend more than 5 minutes on it, because if they do, then it becomes a pain and stuff. But I just want to get that snapshot, and it's so important because it also gets them thinking that having that results I got is a critical one, because I'm not interested in them doing actions for the sake of actions. There's got to be that correlation between actions and results. But that works really well, and it's also a great a great flag for if somebody can't keep that up for the first 30 days. It's normally a fairly good sign that they're going to struggle in our business. And people often do that. They'll do like 2 or 3 days and then drop the 4th day and say, what happened to that report? And oh yeah, do it again. And yeah, okay, this isn't going to work out. But yeah, that works quite well. The other thing on that kind of remote working piece that I find quite interesting is I've got two, one teenager, one preteen, who obviously spend a lot of time on gaming and doing things like that. And because they're both in international schools, and international schools tend to have fairly high turnover because parents bounce all over the world. Mm. So their friends are dotted all over the world. And they are completely used to coming together with a group of people, completing a task in the game, and then disbanding again. And sometimes it's their best friends that they've known for years. Other times it's somebody that they've just met 30 seconds ago. The ones that are good and they like working with, they join up and they do that again. And you just think, hang on, that's just work. I mean, that's just what we're doing all day, every day.
It absolutely is. I see that myself. I have a teenager and a preteen. Actually, it's two teenagers. I'm kind of the dinosaur, as they call me at the moment. But they do the same thing. They meet up. They had, and my youngest, she's also hypertension on the autistic spectrum, and she's having that connection. So it's a bit more safeguard you need to put in place, but she has this ability to connect, and the way she does it is amazing. You are like, wow, that and as you say, it is work, and they also then apply this same methodology a bit in school as well, in the digital classes they have, and I find that is amazing, absolutely amazing.
No, it is interesting to see how it goes, and again, I think it's sort of it to a certain extent. It will come down to, again, some people will just use it as a tool and help them advance, and other people will kind of get sucked into it and spending too much time on it and everything else. But it's right now I'm kind of more in favor of them spending time on that and learning. And I also think like that. I just think about the amount of when we were kids growing up, and kids in our school went to a different country. That was it. They were dead to us. Like there was no email, there was no communication. And now kids today have got friends all over the world. If they want to go visiting when they're older, they've got, you can bounce around, and it's a great opportunity.
No, it surely is, but I think it's but it is like good corporate governance practice, right? It's fantastic to need to use it, but you need to have the right structure around it, so they're using it in a good and in an efficient way.
So on corporate governance, which is a topic that comes up a lot in the world of boards, how did you end up? Surely nobody starts off as a little girl going, when I grow up, I want to be in corporate governance.
Well, I kind of something that's come step by step, and I am very passionate about good corporate governance. It's not just that, it's also about ethics and compliance. I mean, to be honest, I'm actually agronome in the beginning. I was trained to be more on the farming side, but then I kind of step by step grew into where I am today. And I find corporate governance is actually something we already do. It's just not been as visible as it is today. It's how we behave, it's our moral code, it has an impact in finance, how we do business, it's all over there. So today, I'm not going to say it's a buzzword, that's not the thing, but it is already there. It's how, and then I think the key aspect is how do we apply it for boards and organizations, and even our daily jobs, to have something that's workable and practical while respecting the regulations that are in place.
Yeah, I find you're right, it has become a buzzword, and I think whenever something gets caught up like that, then where I struggle with it is when people become obsessed with process and forget the reason for it. And what I did a bunch of research a number of years ago on companies that had survived hundreds of years, or even more than 1,000 years, because ultimately, if you're looking from an entrepreneur's perspective, you want a board and the culture to be able to survive beyond you, and that's kind of the ideal corporate governance, is you've got this longevity, which, by the way, is kind of completely counter to all business strategy these days, which is all about growth at all costs, and nobody's thinking about longevity, because it's very difficult to compensate based on success over a long period, whereas it's easy to compensate for growth. So I did quite a lot of research on those companies that survive hundreds of years, or even more than 1,000 years, to try and figure out what were the commonalities between them. And it was actually fascinating. First thing I discovered was that the two best industries to be in, if you want your company to survive hundreds of years, are religious iconography or alcohol. So those two are pretty timeless. And then I was trying to look at, what did they all have in common? And actually they had very little in common, other than they didn't make big mistakes. And that was really it. It's that, how do you keep a business from doing something stupid? And turns out that's really difficult to do. It's and trying to make it post-generational or sort of multi-generational, and have guardrails in place that can't be pulled down. It's very interesting. So I kind of looked at how governments have done it successfully and not so successfully, and it's a fascinating topic if you kind of look at it from that perspective. And I think one of the interesting things for yourself and others that come from a big company background is what works in a big company background is really unhelpful for a small company.
No, absolutely.
And what's great for a small company doesn't work at all in a level. So it's how have you found that kind of shift?
So I think, again, it's about the first of all, you always need to look at the strategy of the organization. If it's a small startup, it's a big one, it has to be adapted. I think it has to be something that is, you need to think, as you say, on the long term. But if you look at in a small startup, you don't want to have, as you say, the big things you have in a big company. It doesn't work. And again, it has to be adapted to the organization. So for instance, where I am at I also grew up, my background, and my father had a lot of startup companies. I grew up in that practical approach on things and hands-on. It's about having if you're an investor, he will going to ask you, what is your sustainability strategy that's going to impact the corporate governance? So you need to have a framework that we call corporate governance that fit, where all these things kind of fit in or slot in together seamlessly. Because they also like to do, how is your ethics? How do you behave? It doesn't have to be, it can just be half a page as a statement. It doesn't have to be more, but that is something you provide to your external stakeholders, but it'll also give you the board, I think, like, this is where we expect you to be. It's like, we need a good corporate statute for the management of the organizations as well as the board, because that's also going to fly down and also to the people in the organization.
Yeah. Although I think sometimes if you try and do that stuff too early, so things like mission statements and vision statements, oftentimes I find startups need a couple of years before they really get to even figure out that bigger, like, they've kind of got a rough idea, but if they try and put it down in writing too early, it almost becomes an anchor rather than that sort of guiding principle that everyone gets behind.
No, I completely agree, but that's what I mean. I think it's also about, you have to have it in mind. You have to be practical, even if you don't put it in writing. But if you have, I would say, an investor that asks you, okay, this is what you want me to invest in. What is your thinking of these different matters like sustainability? And you don't need much. You can have a couple of lines, that's enough. But again, it has to be practical. And you, as you say, you want the investment first, you want the company to grow. But I think also more and more in the future we're heading towards, we more talk about compliance, we talk about sustainability again. All these areas keep coming up, and it's important to have it in mind. But as you say, first you need the company to get going. But it's
Yeah, but it is great. I mean, we're huge fans, as you well know, of getting advisory boards up and running as quickly as possible in an entrepreneur's journey, because I just think they can be so incredibly valuable. What you do need to do is to make sure they're all aligned with your vision as an entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
And that's critical. Otherwise, you're going to have people pulling in different directions. So one, just kind of getting up to the top of the hour, but one question that is sort of comes up with all conversations across all industries right now is AI. So how are you finding that in your industry? Is it starting to have an impact, or is it still more gimmicky?
It does, step by step, but I think it's again, some organizations are all over there, some is more conservative, but I think it's something absolutely that is super interesting, but it's very important again that you need to managing it in the right way, because it's a new tool. It has all potential, but it's a bit like, I see it a bit like, in the car, you need to get the driving license before you actually get in the car, start driving. And when it comes to AI, if you use it for personal reasons, that's one thing, but also in work, you need to know a bit what you're doing with it, and also not just trust it completely.
Yeah, no, so I was heavily involved in the kind of the late 90s when the internet bubble was like growing like wildfire. And it feels quite similar to that, in that everyone was shouting, "This is the future, this is the future, this is going to change everything." And yet in business, it took a lot, like new businesses were able to embrace it and play with it because they didn't have anything to lose if it didn't work. More established businesses, very sensibly, took a lot longer to embrace the internet. And I mean, really kind of surprisingly how long it took a lot of companies from when it became quite useful to when it got fully integrated, just because the risk of it going wrong was too big. And yeah, I kind of feel like that's happening. There's lots of cool stuff going on in the background, but it's yet to bridge that gap to being something practical and applicable to the majority of businesses.
Yes.
Yet.
I agree. I completely agree with you. It's something you have to have in mind, to have a look at, but you need to have that education and take it step by step. And I mean, you see it. The thing is, it's all kind of there when you do chat. If you go on the site, they have this book coming up, it's already there. But that's been, and then they say, in the end of the day, they say, can't answer the question, they still transfer you over to the human.
Yeah. Hopefully those will get progressively better.
Absolutely.
It's so painful at the moment. So.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, look, it's going to the top of the hour. It's been lovely to catch up with you and learn a little bit more about what you're doing, and I know you're very busy at the moment as well, so I appreciate you taking half an hour. And yeah, we should catch up again soon.
Sounds good to me. Have a lovely day.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Cheers.